And that individual appeared to be pretty angry.
Correct.
And you held him back because you didn't want him to get involved?
Yes. Well, I would say not necessarily angry. He had just been pushed, so he was kind of defending himself.
Okay. And you kind of just said to him, calm down, stand back, right?
Right.
I have no further questions, sir. Thank you very much for your time.
Any redirect?
Yes, sir.
Prior to working or during your work at Cub Foods, did they ever send you to training on how to identify a fake bill?
No.
More just kind of learning from experience?
Correct.
When you did interact with Mr. Floyd in the store, what was his demeanor like?
He seemed very friendly, approachable. He was talkative. He seemed to just be having average Memorial Day, just living his life. But he did seem high.
During the second trip out to the vehicle, it was your coworker who did the majority of the talking to Mr. Floyd and the passenger.
Correct.
So Mr. Nelson asked you to agree that that was a more heated conversation. Was it you who made it more heated or your coworker?
My coworker.
And Mr. Nelson asked you to agree that there was an outright refusal to come back into the store. Was that an actual wording that was used, or was that just Mr. Nelson's words, outright refusal?
That was Mr. Nelson's words.
So Mr. Floyd did not say to you, I'm outright refusing to come back into the store.
No.
But, to be fair, they were not coming back into the store, right?
Correct.
You were asked also about the stretches that Mr. Floyd was doing in the store. And Mr. Nelson demonstrated for us that was a pretty accurate demonstration of what you saw.
Correct.
But during that, Mr. Floyd did not fall down.
No.
Didn't lose his balance at all.
No.
When he indicated he wanted to go buy some cigarettes, you and he both had to move down to the cigarette counter, correct?
Correct.
And is that what he did? Did he tell you, I want to buy some cigarettes?
Correct.
Did he tell you what brand he wanted?
I do not recall.
We saw you just grab a pack, right?
That could have been the case.
And you gave them to him,
Correct.
and he provided you money and took the change, right?
Correct.
So he was able to complete that whole transaction, correct?
Absolutely.
And you didn't have to guess at what cigarettes he wanted.
Correct.
I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Any recross?
Sorry, thank you. You were asked a couple of questions about the counterfeit bill.
Correct.
Do you get a lot of counterfeit bills in that store?
No.
Has it happened before?
Correct.
And I believe you were previously asked about good counterfeits and bad counterfeits in your statements with police.
I do not recall.
Okay. Have you seen some bills that are better counterfeits than other bills?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Not personally, no.
Okay, but you understood that immediately this was a counterfeit bill?
Correct.
Nothing further.
Thanks, sir. You are excused.
Thank you.
Next witness.
Your Honor, the state would call Christopher Belfry to the stand.
If you just stand right here, raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes, sir.
Have a seat. Sir, in order to be able to be heard more clearly, I'm going to keep my mask on, but if you wouldn't mind, if you would take your mask off, if you'd be comfortable doing that.
I don't mind.
All right, thank you. We're going to also test out how the microphone picks you up by having you state your full name and spell each of your names.
Christopher Belfry. ChristopherBelfrey.
All right, it sounds like it'll work fine even if you don't lean in, so
Yep.
feel free. All right,
No problem.
Mr. Frank.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Belfry.
Good morning.
And can you tell us, sir, how old are you?
How old am I?
Yeah.
I'm 45.
Okay. And just tell us, if you would, the general area where you live.
South Minneapolis.
And on May 25th of 2020, is that where you lived?
May 25th of 2020 is where I live? No.
No. Is that where you lived on that day?
Yeah, South Minneapolis.
And how long have you lived in South Minneapolis?
About 3 years.
And you are from, well, let me ask it this way. Are you familiar with the area of 38th in Chicago?
Yes.
And is there a store at one of the corners, at least one of the corners of 38th in Chicago?
Yes.
At least on May 25th there was.
Yes.
And is there also a restaurant there?
Yes.
What was the restaurant in that at that intersection?
What was it?
Yeah, what was the name of it?
I really don't know.
Okay.
To tell you the truth.
On May 25th of 2020, did you go to the area of 38th in Chicago to get some food from one of those restaurants?
Oh, yes, yes.
Okay.
Cup Foods.
Okay. So you went to Cup Foods to get food?
Right. But there's another restaurant across the street. I thought you was talking about that one.
I was, so my fault.
Right.
So you went to that intersection sometime in the late afternoon, early evening, correct?
Correct.
And where did you drive there?
Yes.
Where did you park?
On the corner of 38th and Chicago, on the 38th side, facing Bloomington, or what is that, Cedar
All right.
area.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put up something we've had admitted as Exhibit 1. And that should come up on the screen in front of you.
Right.
Do you see that photograph?
Right.
Do you recognize what is depicted there?
That's 38th and Chicago intersection.
All right. And you should have right in front of you a stylus like this, maybe a different color.
Yep.
See that? What I'd ask you to do is just, for the jurors, draw on the screen where you drove up and where you parked on that day.
Came this way, parked right here.
And when you parked there, do you recall seeing a vehicle in front of you?
Yes, sir.
Do you remember what kind of vehicle that was? Do
Mercedes-Benz,
you remember what color it was?
not right offhand.
Okay. What style of car or vehicle?
It's like a hatchback Mercedes-Benz, like a sports truck or something like that.
And when you pulled up there and parked, did you see something that drew your attention?
Not right offhand. Shortly after, yes, when two officers was coming across the street, I noticed them coming and they approached the vehicle in front of me. One officer drew a handgun and opened the door and pointed the gun at whoever was in the driver's seat.
So at that point in time, had you gotten your food already or not yet?
No,
Okay.
no, sir.
And so you were just sitting in your car and you see these officers pull up,
Yes, sir.
or walk up, correct?
Right.
And after seeing that, what happened next?
Kind of startled me, You know, from where I'm from, when you see officers.
Stop right there. Don't talk about past experience. Talk about
Yes,
what your
sir.
reaction was.
Yeah.
Thank
Let
you.
It startled me,
Yeah,
you
let me-
know, when I seen the officer raise his gun.
Yeah, let me just.
I started recording.
Okay, that's exactly what I wanted to ask you
Right.
about, right? So at some point you started recording that,
Right.
and
Correct.
that was because of basically what you saw, correct?
Right.
All right. And so when you were parked there, you started making a recording, correct?
Correct.
And at some point you stopped the recording.
Correct.
Why did you stop that recording at that point in time?
Because I heard more sirens pulling up, and I didn't want to be trapped in between the whole commotion of what's going on. I didn't know exactly what was going on. It's just I didn't want to be in the middle of, you know, a bunch of commotion about what's going on. So I moved across the street.
So you moved your car.
Yes, sir.
And prior to coming into court today, did we show you a copy of that video?
Yes, sir.
And did that video truly and accurately represent what you were seeing while you were recording it?
Yes, sir.
We've marked that as Exhibit 35, and Your Honor, I would offer Exhibit 35 at this time.
35 is received.
Okay, Mr. Belfry, we're going to play that video for you now, and then we'll ask you some questions about it either during or after it, okay?
Okay.
Right here.
Now, when you were making that recording, do you recall if your window was down and your...
Yeah. Yes, sir.
So we were able to hear some of it on the video. Were you able to hear any better sitting there in person than with the video?
I vaguely heard most of it.
What were you kind of hearing?
I heard him asking him to let me see your hand. He's saying, please, something about I've been shot or something before. Please don't, something like that. And at that time, that's when I heard the sirens pulling up and they're pulling him out. And that's when I went to back up and turn around.
Okay.
Stop.
And so I'm going to go back now to Exhibit 1. We'll put that up again. And again, if you would take the stylus and just kind of show the jurors where you went when you moved your vehicle.
Backed up. Moved the vehicle there.
So for the record, you're showing that you moved from the Dragon Walk side of 38th to the Cup Food side of 38th, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. And when you got over there, what did you do?
I continued to record.
And were you, well, you started recording again, correct?
Right.
And when you were recording, did you have somebody in the car with you?
Yes, my fiance. Well, she was in the car, in Cup Foods getting the food. So by the time I turned around, she came out and got in the car.
And so during that recording, some conversations between you and her were also recorded.
Yes, sir.
And so did you start recording then at that point?
Yes, sir.
All right. And prior to coming into court, did you also have a chance to review that video?
Yes, sir.
And it appears to be a true and accurate copy of the actual video you made.
Most definitely.
Now, I will tell you that we have deleted the audio from this video.
Yes, sir.
Conversation that you and your fiancé had, it's not important, it's the video.
Right.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And so we have marked that as Exhibit 36, and we would offer it at this time.
Any objection? 36.
All right, so now we'll show Exhibit 36. Now, I'd ask to pause it right here, please. And there's no timestamp on the video, so we will do our best to describe it. Oh, there is a timestamp on the video. This will be at approximately 26 seconds. Do you see that? All right. And what you're seeing here, obviously there are two officers, well, there are now 3 officers on the scene, correct?
Correct.
And the original 2 officers are in this view, and one of the officers is with the individual sitting on the ground, correct?
Correct.
The individual sitting on the ground, do you recall seeing him from when you were parked behind the Mercedes before?
Correct.
Where was that individual when you were parked behind the vehicle?
He was in the driver's seat.
So that's the same individual that in the prior video had been removed from the driver's
Correct.
seat. And did you see while you were moving the car how those 2 officers and that individual went from the Mercedes in the prior video to where they are now?
Correct.
How did that happen?
They brought him out, walked him over to the sidewalk, sat him down. One officer then went over to the other people that was in the vehicle and started asking them questions.
And then the other officer had the driver sit on the ground there where we see him now?
Correct.
All right. So then we'll continue to play Exhibit 36, please. So Exhibit 36 has ended, and you stopped filming at that moment?
Yes, sir.
And why did you stop recording then?
Slightly still kind of scared, nervous. One of the officers kept staring at me like while I was recording. So I kind of put it down, and then I went to record again, but I was like, I really don't want any problems, so I stopped recording.
At that point, did you think that this incident with this individual and the officers was over?
Somewhat I've seen when I stopped recording, I drove towards the corner as they crossed over with George, the two officers that came and approached him in the first place. They went to walk him across the street. Then when we went to turn to go back home, we seen them placing him in the police car. So that's all I seen, and I kept on driving. I thought he was detained. I thought it was over, so I kept on going home.
Now, you referred to George.
Yes.
Who do you mean by that?
I felt that George was detained.
Okay. But when you use the name George, this individual who was removed from the SUV, the Mercedes, did you know that gentleman?
No, not at all.
Have you subsequent to this learned who that was?
Yes, sir.
Was that George Floyd?
Yes, sir.
All right. So you saw them moving Mr. Floyd after you stopped recording?
Right. Yes, sir.
So I'm going to put Exhibit 1 back up, please. And if you would, again, show the jurors, where you saw them. Well, if you would just put an X on here where you were parked when you made that second video. Do you know what I mean?
Okay. How do you take that?
Should we try again? Okay. And then if you would, show the jurors where you saw them walking Mr. Floyd after you stopped recording.
And walking him this way.
And so then at some point you started up your car and drove off out of the area.
Correct.
And can you show the jurors where you drove when you did that? And so the record should reflect you turned from 38th Street to go what would be southbound on Chicago?
Correct.
All right. And the record should also reflect that you're indicating the officers walking Mr. Floyd from the Dragon Walk corner, what would be northbound on Chicago, correct?
Correct.
Towards the Cup Food store.
Correct.
Now, when you turned and went south on Chicago, had they already walked Mr. Floyd in front of you over to that, or did you cut in front of them? Do you know what I mean?
I believe they already crossed. I'm not sure, to tell you the truth. It was a while ago. I'm not sure if they was before or after, to tell you the truth.
But at one point you said earlier that you saw them putting him in a squad car.
Right.
Where did you
Correct.
see that taking place?
Over here.
So when you turned to go southbound, is that when you looked to see-
Behind us in the rear view. Yeah.
Okay. And then have anything else to do with that scene that night?
Nope. That's it.
I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Any cross? Yeah. Sir, you may step down. Thank you. Sidebar?
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. This is Dan at Unicorn Riot. We had a little bit of a technical snag earlier, so we might be resetting some of the streams during the lunch break, and right now they're on sidebar. And so we will, we're going to have to reset the YouTube in a few minutes, I think. But we really appreciate your support. The defense did not cross-examine this guy.
Members of the jury, it looks like the best schedule would be to take our lunch break now. We'll try and reconvene about 1:15. Thank you.
Hey, this is Dan from Unicorn Riot. Thanks for joining us. So we've been hearing today, we started with Genevieve Hansen, the firefighter. That was very brief. and then we went over to the clerk at. We went over to could talk to the person who testified was the clerk at Cup Foods, the person who thought that the bill was counterfeit. So let's see. So that then we had this other eyewitness, and so we got a pretty clear sense of the events in Cup Foods, and they showed like the surveillance footage and stuff like that. So they're away for an hour 10 now, and so yeah, we've got to. So I'm sorry, we have to fiddle around with our back end system. There's always funny quirks and stuff, so it might take a second to get it figured out. I just want to go over this. We didn't have too much time since there was a lot going on. Just to show you who's been talking. You know, there's been a lot from Matthew Frank, who's a Minnesota Assistant Attorney General. Steve Slisher also comes in a lot of the time. Jerry Blackwell was who gave the opening statements. We saw Aaron Eldridge speak yesterday. And then Christina Marinkaki is one of the jury specialists. Sundeep Iyer and Neil Katyal have also given arguments kind of earlier on during the motions. Earlier in the trial, we saw them. Joshua Larson, I think we did see at one point. Peter Cahill is the Hennepin County District Judge. He's, front and center all the time. Eric Nelson is the main defense attorney. You see him quite a lot for Derek Chauvin, the ex-MPD officer. Amy Voss usually sits right behind Nelson, watching, using the computer, has not been questioning people. And then Derek Chauvin is pictured at right in the image. He's, giving quite a weird vibe this whole time. He sits next to Nelson. So, yeah, so they're going to be off for an hour 10. So, let me just, if you give me 1 second here. We still have 19 minutes left for our interview that we ran with Keith, the 911 operator who, and he talks a lot about the big picture of surveillance and property and stuff like that, but he also knows a lot of details about the inner workings of the city. So Keith is an interesting person to talk to. So if you'll give me 1 second. Yeah, we had a little bit of unusual pesky technical issues, so we had a couple of snags today, and so we are going to reset the YouTube stream in a little while here to get it cleaned up. And thank you all for joining us. So we're gonna run the Keith video for 20 minutes, and then probably reset YouTube. So Unicorn Riot's a 501c3 nonprofit media organization. You can check out our website at unicornriot.ninja. We have a lot of coverage on the Line 3 Enbridge pipeline. We have a new contributed piece about the Brazil pandemic, and one about a protest in uptown Minneapolis that was addressing the city of Minneapolis sort of briefly attacked a camp for people that don't have permanent housing called the Near North Camp. So that's been a major thing. And those folks are on a parcel of land that's owned by the CPED department of the city. And you can find out more information about that camp and all of that stuff, as well as the police attack is the post right below it. And besides that, we have a whole series, 21st Century Jim Crow in the North Star City and Minneapolis Downtown Dark Alliance, talking about how the Target Corporation helped build up an entire system to control downtown, to intensify surveillance, and that is an important series of events involving the Downtown Council, and especially Target Corporation, building up a large surveillance system downtown and using that to kind of create, more of a police state, more privatized systems in downtown Minneapolis. So we also have a piece by another contributor, Sam Richards, about catching FBI spy planes and using electronic technology to detect the emissions from spy planes. We have a piece from Georgia Fort about the Blue Lives Matter, the Black Lives Matter, and the jury questionnaire. And if you listen to the jury selection, that was a huge, huge issue. The Derek Chauvin landing page, we try to consistently update that with the live feeds and everything that's there. And again, I did mention earlier that we had a story back in January about Jay Coles, a reporter at KSTP, Channel 5. He became truly infamous for something called Pointergate, where he accused the former mayor, Betsy Hodges, of making a so-called gang sign because she pointed at someone who was doing door-to-door voter registration in Minneapolis. And Jay Coles was doing what he often does, which is peddle absurd claims from the police union and police officials that this was a gang sign, and they were full of concerns about the gang sign. And even though that obviously doesn't pass the smell test, Jay Coles was certainly going on about that. So this story, I wrote this story along with Nico and our contributor Sam Richards. And what we analyzed here was not only did Jay Coles pass along a false claim, or seemingly fabricated himself, because the source walked it back and said, no, I didn't really tell him that he put up this false claim through Channel 5 that the station retracted, that anti-fascists and leftists had attacked the U.S. Capitol in January, which is absurd. And before that, he went on a Joe Souchere Garage Logic podcast published by Hubbard Broadcasting, claiming that police had been working on trying to feed him stories to demonize the people around George Floyd Square. And the idea was that Coles was explaining to Souchere that the police help build his stories for him and hand him information. And so Coles spelled out this little daisy chain of police peddling information in that podcast. And so we have a clip of that in the story. So media analysis is very important. And the problems of the corporate media in the Twin Cities are pretty serious. And as we quoted in the story, David Brower, a longtime media analyst, carefully explained that for a very long time, Jay Coles has always been one of the go-to people who will go along with whatever the police say. He will not really interpret critically anything from these institutions. And so now, there aren't that many alternative institutions of media criticism happening in the Twin Cities anymore. And, a piece similar to this might have run in City Pages before it got shut down by its billionaire owner, Glenn Taylor, who owns the Timberwolves and the Star Tribune and has a huge amount of power downtown. So he didn't see any need to keep the City Pages going. So this Jay Cole story is back from January, and it's, it explains a great deal of that stuff. So I just wanted to highlight that one because we hadn't talked about it lately. It's important to know that federal prosecutors are throwing around civil disorder charges. There's definitely charges and investigations to keep an eye on, which the feds are doing over in federal court. And so it matters a lot who becomes put in as U.S. attorney. I won't get into it too much, but things like grand juries are a big deal in the Twin Cities and have been for a long time. So keep an eye on what the feds are doing and keep an eye on who gets nominated for U.S. attorney. We saw earlier that a lot of community groups were against Andy Lugar trying to become U.S. attorney. We saw the Star Tribune editorial board whining that so many people were critical of Andy Lugar for making bad decisions as U.S. attorney. And this is why it matters, is because that affects how these prosecutions happen. So keep an eye on the federal level. And, obviously we see prosecutors after Chauvin here, state prosecutors, but it's always a big question, what do prosecutors do to keep social movements from challenging entrenched power structures in the Capitol? That's a good question, and we're going to see what happens with these other prosecutions. So we have a big piece here, Race and Perception, the first 2 weeks of the Derek Chauvin trial. Our member Alex Binder put this together, and this has a lot of info about that pre-trial period, that period of the jury selection, and when we started watching everything very carefully. And that showed a lot of stuff about bias and who is allowed to be on the jury. We've run a lot of clips from folks talking about how the juries are, anyone who's inclined to be critical of the police is not considered to be objective enough to be on the jury. They're sort of people that are kind of oblivious to problems with police are somehow more qualified to be on the jury. Seems to be the way that this works. That's kind of been a dimension of this thing going on, so take a look at that if you want to consider that. Justice families seek police accountability with Derek Chauvin trial getting underway. So this was a press conference that we recorded where a lot of family members were talking about how painful it is that the police have killed their family members. So that's another story we have up online in the full video. Black Panthers and Yellow Panthers speak out during the Chauvin trial. This is based on an interview that Nico did with those folks out by the courthouse. So, so we've had definitely some reporting on the ground from our folks over this process. We're trying to do that as much as we can. So again, we're waiting for another hour here for them to come back. So I'm going to get this video with Keith running again, and then we will be resetting our systems a little bit with YouTube. So you're going to want to switch in a little bit, and then we'll be ready for it to start in an hour from now at 1:15 Central. So thanks again for tuning in. I'm Dan at Unicorn Riot, your producer today. I didn't see too many questions on the chats. Maybe before, maybe in about 50 minutes or so, we can try to take questions on the chats again. Thanks so much. I really appreciate your support. Yes, someone said it was weird. They were watching. Yeah, we had a signal glitch, so people might have been kicked off of our feeds earlier today, but I think it'll probably smooth out. We're going to adjust some things over the lunch break here. So thanks for tuning in, everyone. We do really appreciate your support. Take care, everybody.
Can't tell you what you can do. It was highly encouraged. I saw the racism inside the department right from the very beginning. Just the fact that the most important thing in a descriptor of a person is their race. It's not like that's the way you start out everything: black male, white male, Asian male, native male, then their age, then their height, that kind of thing. So, and clothing lasts. So the very thing that may be distinguishing among them is the last thing, and the thing that's in common is the first thing, and it's all skin color. So, they're racist and they know it. Our own chief had to sue the Minneapolis Police Department along with 4 other high-ranking officers just to be able to work in a comfortable environment. I mean, the things that these people did to them was horrible. And they'll tell you, they put rats in their lockers, they hung nooses at their desks. Minneapolis Police Department has a long, illustrious history of being racist. We had riots in the 60s along Plymouth Avenue. There was a reason for that, This police department has been racist for a long time. And it really hurts me to see that they're not taking any of this seriously. They've made no changes since George Floyd. I have not seen one change. And nothing. Absolutely nothing. They say that, we require the body cameras to be on. That was already a policy. They have not made one change. They've not disciplined anybody. The only person who's been disciplined is a woman who interviewed with a magazine that talked about the toxic MPD culture. So for her to stand up and say that and then get disciplined by a person who sued over the MPD toxic culture is just ludicrous.
And it took them 7 months on the investigation to find her. And then Arredondo then demote Art Knight for also calling out the toxic culture.
That's exactly right. And Art Knight was number 2 in charge.
Deputy chief.
And Art Knight got called out because he said we got white people, sensitive white people. Yeah. And, that's ridiculous. Nobody got called out. We've seen incident after incident. We've seen the 4th Precinct Christmas tree incident. Those cops are working for the precinct again. That's ridiculous. There's no way. We've seen them take Native Americans. Now, granted, this was a while ago, but they put them in the trunk to transport. We've seen these abuses.
They beat on them too?
Yeah, they beat on them. They beat on them, and then they put them in the transport. In the truck in the trunk of the squad car. A lot of these cops resisted when we got GPS to track the squads. They resisted that. They didn't want anybody to know where they were.
So you were working with the city while that was occurring?
Yes.
Really?
Yes. And the vast majority of the police were against GPS. But then when one woman accused an officer of rape and the GPS proved that he was nowhere even near where she said, all of a sudden everybody liked GPS. So, you know, same thing with the body cameras. They told us that the body camera is going to protect us. When you see the body camera footage, we never see it. It's always to protect the officers. And then when they're going to do something that they know is wrong, they turn it off. Suddenly it malfunctions, whatever. And, you know, that's our money. That $27 million that they paid, I'm happy for the Floyd family that they got it. But that's our money. That's the taxpayer money. It's not coming out of the police pension. It's not coming out of Derek Chauvin's $1 million pension. So, no. These guys are not just working class stiffs. They're making lots of money. They talk about they don't have enough police to take care of the crime in the city, and yet they still have police providing off-duty protection at grocery stores. So what's more important? Once again, it's property over people. Once again, if you just watch, once you realize and you start watching the trend, you'll notice. What do? They chase stolen cars, putting everybody's lives at risk. They've killed numerous people in stolen chases. Why? They know it's a stolen car. It's a vehicle. Again, property that can be replaced. Human lives can't be replaced. They have no regard for that. People have been calling for those chase policies to end. They won't do it. So that shows, you know, very same thing. Property over people. Always. Always.
Real quick, and thank you for all this. It's been really enlightening for me as well. Talking about last summer and property over people, and the police seem to have left a lot of areas of the south and the north side and not policed them. And maybe gone on a silent strike, as many are calling it.
Oh, yeah.
And maybe organized by Bob Kroll, who was the union president at the time. What is your interpretation of what happened directly after George Floyd was killed in the next few coming days that led to the uprising, or that when the uprising was happening before the National Guard came in?
Well,
and then you can talk about this summer and how, what's your interpretation of the policing happened with the crime and all that?
Yeah, sure. Well, you know, from the very beginning, I think they made the mistake of being disingenuous from the very beginning. And John Elder went out there and said, you know, we had this incident where an individual had a medical emergency while being arrested. Now we've seen the video. We know what the medical emergency was. He didn't have any kind of medical emergency, and that's disingenuous. But see, the press, a lot of the press are held captive because if they want to get the story, they have to play the game. They have to go through the PIO. That's the official information. And I just call them, he's the spinner of lies. You know, that's where the lies start. They coordinate defenses between the officers. They share their stories, how to beat the raps. We saw that in the case of Justine DeMond, where they actually coached the officers how to respond to questioning. So I think that was the very beginning, was they started the whole process with disingenuous and lying. And it gets worse from there, because then they responded with way too much force. I mean, you know, if you approach something from a militarized point of view, then that's what you're conditioning your people for, is militarization. So when people came out with justifiable anger, with hard emotions, rather than defuse the situation, they've got snipers on the roof of the precinct. They're firing rubber bullets at people. They're firing tear gas. Their very first protest, we left when they started firing flashbangs and started firing gas cannons and stuff. I was like, we need to get out of here. And we left. Literally, we could smell the tear gas a mile away. So think about that, what that does to the entire neighborhood. That entire neighborhood was covered in tear gas. So, they're not concerned with the people. They're not, this was about establishing authority. And the people had said, we've had enough. We've had enough of these murders. You know, just the year before that, they had killed, I think it was 12 people, you know, And so one for every month of the year they killed. And, everybody deserves a trial. Derek Chauvin's getting a trial, but Floyd never gets a trial. Thurman Blevins never gets a trial. Travis Jordan never gets a trial. And none of this. And that's the shame, the state doesn't even have a death penalty, but they're always afraid, they're always terrified, and the fact of the matter is they can retreat from their squad car, they can take protective evasive action. They've done it. We see it over and over. They have these SWAT events, but yet when it comes to black and brown people, then they gotta rush, and that's not right. And there is a different standard. So, that's what I see from my eyes. Now, as the last summer, that's, the militarization. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous to have MRAPs driving through our city. It's ridiculous to have LRADs coming out here to utilize against people. We got helicopters surveilling us all the time. And then they try to tell us that this is for carjackings. This is ridiculous. They barely made any arrests on this alleged carjacking thing. This is spying on people. And it's not just them. The FBI planes are around circling the city, and they got planes up there. There's all kinds of surveillance. If people knew how bad our social media accounts are surveilled at that fusion center, I guarantee you they're watching my Facebook, watching any social media that I have. There's companies out there that perform big data searches just to do keywords to provide intelligence with what's going on off, let's say, a Twitter feed. So they just crunch enormous amounts of data to be able to search a keyword and hone in on that and start tracking those people. Many times in 911, if you wanted to find out how to find out who a person was, you just turn to their social media accounts and search their names. They have access to all kinds of tools that they can utilize. There's also got the NCIC and Criminal Justice Information System, so they can run people's records on the computers and stuff. They've got that all at their touch of their fingers. And they also have automatic license plate readers. So if you cross a bridge in Minneapolis, all you got to do is cross the bridge, and your license plate automatically is read, searched for if your car, anybody associated with your car has any kind of warrants. So all you're doing is crossing a bridge, but you're surveilled like that. And they have automatic license plates readers in the cars. So not everyone, but a lot. So they're constantly surveilling you, constantly. And people don't realize to the extent. Hennepin County was asked to go to Standing Rock for a reason. They got stingrays. So they have fake cell phone towers that capture all your cell phone traffic. I'm sure they're deploying them now. And they just can track any cell phone. So, it doesn't matter what you do. They are going to surveil you. If you're on the list, you're on the list. I'm on the list. I know that.
Scary stuff, man. So,
yeah.
Real quick, how connected is all this interagency surveillance?
Oh, it's very connected. That fusion center, that is the central hub for all this information. That information gets sent out all the time, agency to agency. You'll get nationwide messages, you'll get statewide messages, you get county messages, and even the communication systems, is referred to. It was referenced today by them talking about Metcom, that you've got a channel that you can go on and raise any agency. You've got statewide channels that you can go on and raise any agency right away and say, we need your assistance with this. And granted, there is a use for that. There is a productive use for that. But there's also non-productive use. So, and I guess that was the thing that really struck me, was the fact that the medics went into the scene and they called right away. I take that back. They called within a minute. They wanted fire added to the scene. So the medics, they do have advanced life support, but the fire department is the ones that respond to real emergent life or death. This person is going to die if they don't get medical emergency right now. And they do that because they're able to respond so fast. Whereas an ambulance may be 20 minutes out. A fire rig is, like Jenna referred to, 3 or 4 minutes out.
On the trial today, it was 4 minutes away.
4 minutes away, yeah. That's really, it would be a long call for 4 minutes. Usually they're on the scene within 3 minutes of dispatching the call. I mean, right away they're out the door and they're on the scene usually within 3 minutes. Fire department is super fast, and that's why they're utilized. So, but I found it interesting. It really struck me today. I guess I never saw that car rocking back and forth like that. It really struck me that they never toned help, because that indicated, whether it was Floyd fighting with them or them fighting with Floyd, that indicated they were fighting, and that would be a help call. But they didn't call for a help call, and that leads me to believe they knew what they were doing. They didn't want any more police there. They wanted to cover up their crimes. But, they have surveillance. Now we have surveillance. Everybody carries a cell phone. Everybody's got a camera. And nobody's afraid to utilize it anymore. So that's why these police are getting called out over and over and over. You look at every top case. Why are they making these top cases? Because somebody was there with a camera,
So far from what we know, Darnella Fraser's been safe, whereas Ramsey Orta, who filmed Eric Garner, I Can't Breathe, before he passed or got killed, hasn't been safe.
That's right.
He faced a lot of retribution from the police.
That's right. They've locked him up repeatedly over and over and over. And, I want to recognize Darnella because, that was, again, an incredibly courageous thing to do, an amazingly courageous thing to do. And, she didn't hesitate. She knew right from wrong. People know right from wrong. And so, I really want her to be protected. That was an amazing, courageous thing for her to do. And, I've gotten irritated when I hear people say, well, why didn't anybody fight back? Well, because people had guns available to them and they were showing that they would kill you. And people did fight back with the tools that they had. They had their voice and they had the camera. And so, Darnella used her camera, and there were other people on the scene that used their voice. And when the truth was told, the whole city uprose, the whole state uprose, the whole country uprose, and the whole world. They had 25,000 people march in Christchurch, New Zealand, as far away from Minneapolis as you can possibly get on the globe. But 25,000 people were touched by Floyd's life and his brutal murder at the hands of the 4 police officers. And the whole world reacted with repulsion and horror and a call for justice and right. And to me, you can't overcome that. That's the will of the people. We saw the will of the people.
I want to touch on Alicia, who also was a witness today, also put her video up there.
Yes.
So that's another one of those heroes in the situation.
Yes, another person who, said something doesn't look right. I'm going to take video of this. People know when something looks wrong. They're not fooled by this. We're not fooled by these police tactics. And it's not like, I just can't say enough. They haven't learned anything from the experience. To go in and violently raid these homeless encampments is just, during a time of pandemic, it's a smack in the face. And it just shows you the lack of compassion, the lack of, it's horrifying to me that you would treat somebody who is literally freezing inside of a tent in the middle of a Minnesota winter, in the middle of a pandemic, and you're going to go in, take everything that they own in the world and throw it in the garbage, brutalize people. It's horrifying. And so I really want people to call out what they know is right. People know right from wrong. We've seen that over and over. We saw Darnella. We saw Jenna. We've seen other people stand up and call out these abuses of power. And they need to take it seriously. Everything changes. Everything. That's a law. One that doesn't need enforcement by the police. Everything changes, and this old archaic system is on its last legs. It's changing, and the police need to adapt, or they're going to be caught out off guards like they were last summer. People aren't going to stand for that mess anymore. It's just, no matter what side you're on, people are not going to stand for what they feel are their rights being taken away. So,
any last words?
Just again, I say, if you see something wrong, say something. Do something as much as you can. Of course, not everybody's going to throw themselves in front of a moving truck, but say something, do something, and call it out. And don't be afraid of these. That's the biggest thing. Do not be afraid, because ultimately, the reason they give every single time for their brutal actions is they were afraid, and they are afraid. That's why they're behind these walls. That's why they don't want us to see them. They literally can't stand the public scrutiny on them, and they're hiding. And so say something, stand up, fight for what's right, and choose the side of being with people and stopping harm to people.
April 28th of 24th, 1997. This is like 24 years ago. He was killed in an apartment building that my mother and father lived in. He had 6 bullets put in his body, shot in the back. The officer that killed him, and the officers that were involved in the murder came up with a story, planted a gun, and put in the papers lies regarding my son. Today I'm here to find justice because the lies that they covered up and to cover their story is needs to be brought to the truth. And I know that these women are fighting for the truth out here because, like Derek, they shot that boy just recently in the back, and it makes me think about 23 years ago when they shot my son, and then they called themselves planting a gun, but they shot that boy innocent. That was an innocent boy when they done that to him. And so when we look back then, how they silence you, make you where you're afraid to speak, and today they have cameras, phones, so let the truth be told, and we all demand justice, and we want this truth to come out, and I'm hoping that the truth will come out and these officers will have justice. Thank you. You're here.
Hi, my name is Tiffany. This is my sister Danielle. We are the siblings of Jamar Clark. He was a 24-year-old young man who was murdered by 4th Precinct Police. He, on November 15th, 2015, he was handcuffed and shot in the face, point blank range. Again, no justice. Our family has been through so much with the state and the police department covering up my brother's murder and tormenting our family. We've had several times where we were afraid to speak out, afraid to share his story, afraid to tell the truth because our lives have been in danger. So we stand in solidarity with not only our families here, but with George Floyd's family, to seek justice for all of us. And first and foremost, just keeping our families at the forefront of everything when it comes to seeking justice and allowing our families to speak out and allowing that space, because a lot of the times they try to shut us up. They try to, silence us, but we're here and we're going to continue to speak out, and we're going to continue to fight. We're going to